Yes. You. Oh.
Very good morning, everyone, and happy Wednesday. Shiva, if you're ready, we can get started. We can see.
So, good morning, everyone. So today is going to be a short and sweet update. I actually basically have to run for another meeting with a partner after this call, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of share updates, and basically there are significant updates in this week's version of what we have kind of put together. So with that said, let's start. So one of the key things was basically like remediation of compliances. So we've actually focused. What we've done in the last 2 weeks is that we've kind of taken out specific functionality, and we had basically teams working on that specific functionality to make that rock solid and proper. So there was one team which essentially worked on the entire compliance piece, the other team which basically worked on vulnerability remediations, remediation plans, problems, and you would actually see a significant jump in terms of the stability and the quality of things that are happening in those areas. And we want to thank a whole bunch of people who kind of contributed and basically sent us feedback, which essentially has allowed us to actually improve those areas and basically get it into a good shape right now. So one is basically you have the ability to download GPU and WMI filters, which essentially allows you to remediate all of the issues that you have in terms of compliance. And so once you download this, you can essentially apply this to any of the systems that you have. You can apply this as a GPO where you can do it across Active Directory. And basically you can select which systems you want to apply it using WMI filter. So you can choose what policies you want to apply to a certain set of devices, which are say Windows 11, some of them which are Windows 10 and Windows Server. All of that essentially can be done through this. So we've given this complete capability, and it's also documented. Now, moving on to Linux. So basically, if you look at it, our compliance was basically weak on the Linux side. So right now, we essentially have added support for SUSE Linux, which was basically one of the things that a lot of folks had asked for. And also for basically Debian. Earlier, we had Ubuntu, but now we have support for all of the Debian and Debian variants that basically are there. So all of that is essentially supported in here. There are actually some very massive changes that are also coming in the user experience for this, which makes it more auditor friendly, and that we will talk about next week. But basically, these changes are already in there. The next thing is that there was one request which was there saying that we basically run the scans every 15 minutes because we want the agent to be real time. But people wanted to exclude the lightweight agent scan for a certain period of time. Say, for example, I don't want it to happen between 9 a.m. and 11 a.m. in the morning when people are basically opening up their PowerPoint files or their Word files, etc. So we basically gave this provision, which basically I think was a request from somebody. So we looked at it. The next one is that whenever agents are not installed properly, one of the things is that you opened a support ticket and then we basically told you that some dependencies were not installed properly, etc. So to allow easy debugging from your side without us basically having to kind of get involved in the process, we have a dependency status for each agent where we basically talk about what are the different executables and what are the files which are in there. And you can essentially kind of see the status of all of these files. And if it's all green, it's good. If you basically find a red over there, then essentially it means that those files are missing and we are not able to download it. So you can essentially look at your EDR, MDR, etc. to see why that particular file is not getting downloaded and it's getting blocked at that particular level. So this essentially allows that to be something that you can do. The second is basically the communication with our servers. It basically just tells you whether all the communication is going on fine or it is basically failing. So you can essentially kind of look at this traffic in your firewall and whitelist it. The next one is basically we've added the suppression option under global vulnerabilities. So we already had suppressions and basically remediations, but we basically added it into global vulnerabilities, global problems. So the workflow is the same, but basically we've added into and also in the global solutions, and you can suppress this across the entire set of companies, or you want to suppress it only for a certain set of companies. All of that essentially can be handled from here. And the next thing is that when the company, the metrics view that we have for each company, one of the things that was basically missing earlier was that we were not basically showing the external scan vulnerabilities as part of this. And so now we essentially have got all the external scan vulnerabilities also into a tile in this particular company metrics page, which is basically important for a lot of folks. And other thing is that the OS vulnerability views are now basically available at a global level too. They were earlier available at a company level, and so we basically have pushed that at a global level too. Okay. The other thing is that basically you can we now basically have additional data, which basically we have a company filter. So you can essentially, when you're in the global solutions view, one of the things that earlier we had was that we essentially provided you with all the global solutions and you could essentially look at which companies are impacted by it. There was a request to basically have the ability to just break that down and basically filter by company so that you can essentially say, okay, I want to see data only these 2 companies in the global view. And that also has been, so it's basically more of a slice and dice view that you can use the global security view to it. So with that said, one of the pending items that we took as action item in the last call was basically on-prem, where we had talked about the model where we will host the user interface and the image will basically contain only the backend. And then we received some feedback saying that we don't want it that way. We want all of that stuff to basically be residing in our end. And so we've been working at it for the past couple of weeks and we've finally been able to complete it. And today, this is essentially kind of the experience for anybody who's going to be installing on-prem, the on-prem version, right? So here is basically, so when you basically install you'll be giving you a VMware, Hyper-V, Azure, AWS image. These images are available. And when we give you this image, the first time when you boot up, you have to essentially go to that IP address :8080. So, and when you go to that particular port, basically this wizard will open up. So please remember that we cannot essentially configure a certificate when the default image comes up, because at that point of time, we basically don't know the host name, etc., to configure a certificate for it. So we basically, it is basically initially going to be allowed only with your this thing. So the moment you basically get into it, it essentially checks outbound connectivity. So it wants outbound connectivity to 2 of these servers. And so basically we talk about whether these ports are available and whether these outbound ports are checked. So it basically checks for connectivity from your server to basically our services, which essentially are used by this server. So once this connectivity passes, the next step is basically you have to enter a bunch of details to basically create your pod and tenant. So here is where you'll essentially put your company name, your the name under which you're registering. This will be used for the first account that's created, your country, your state, mobile, etc. So these are pieces of information that we need in order to be able to populate your tenant. And basically once that population is done, then what happens is that it goes through a complete setup. So basically it will set up all of the so all of the components are there in there, but basically for your specific tenant, it will set up all the tables with the tenant IDs and all of that stuff set up, all the environment variable required for the application services, the web services, all of that will essentially be set up immediately. Once that is set up, then it basically checks the DNS. It then will basically create a DNS, which is basically in our cloud, which is pointing to the IP of your server, which will basically be a myconnectsecure.com ID, which will essentially be it will be a pod number and basically this thing. So these entries are automatically created. And once that is created and then we are able to route to this, you will essentially be able to access your on-prem version. Post this, the way that you can create your own URL, your own custom URL and do all the customization is exactly like how we have the custom URL option in this thing. You can upload the certificate, you can upload the URL name that you want, and we will essentially, and you basically point it to your server IP address, and that will essentially be taken care of over there. So that's essentially how the on-prem will work. And this is basically has been designed based on the requirements that you folks gave us. So it basically will reside on a server. So this is available right now, and we can ship out the images. So anybody who needs the on-prem installation, I think a couple of you basically had last asked for it. So please basically send either me or support@connectsecure.com an email, and we will essentially get this image for you. And we will also basically, my request is like when you install this, please use an onboarding session to install it, because if you run into a problem, then we can help you if it's an onboarding session, and it will lower the level of frustration that you may have in setting it up. So the overall setup will take around 30 minutes if everything is basically correctly done. So it should be a quick 30-minute call in which you can get this set up and be good to go. Okay. And apart from that, we have a whole bunch of release updates. And basically, I want to basically give a shout out to Masih in Celra IT. He basically gave us this thing about a graph which basically shows over a trend over a period of time, which basically says remediations closed over the last 7 days. So this was basically added into the report and it's being added into the product also. And then we have dashboards which basically talk about application vulnerability trending, whether it's going up or going down. That entire dashboard is basically in there. So now we are basically capturing trends and how vulnerabilities are basically trending in your environment. And then I don't know if you guys have looked at it, but basically now we have suppression not only for operating system, but for all software. So you can actually decide to suppress like when a new vulnerability comes, you can basically have a period of snooze so that you get the time to basically patch the application before the customer sees it and he sees that all the scores have basically drastically fallen down. And then we have the ability. So these are all other things in terms of basically what you want to see, what you don't want to see in the tables, etc. There have been some enhancements which are done. Most important thing, people basically wanted to understand when a probe goes down or a server agent goes down. So those essentially are added as events. So those can be created as tickets. So just in case those go down, then your support team can essentially get in and look at things. Okay, so that basically is the set of updates that we have for this week. So we've kind of completed quite a bit of the work in terms of the stability, etc. There have been a few questions that came up from last week's meetings, etc. And then we followed up with everyone. And in case you're basically facing any issues, please send us a mail. We are basically this thing. Now, let us go to the questions that I can see. Okay, good morning. This is if I just start before last week when compared to we're seeing significant difference in agent counts. I see about double the lightweight agents listed in V3 as the V4. The V3 number looks very close to what our total active Windows devices. V4 isn't even close, but we need to work with support on this difference. So Yeah, so as I said, you can look at your this thing. We can look at your tenant and basically tell you most of the time what really happens is that either those assets basically are offline, or basically there is some from that asset basically we are unable to basically reach the URL. So a whitelisting might be required. If those are not the case, then please reach out to us. We've been helping a lot of customers who basically had this problem. Once they whitelisted in the portal, then all of the agents basically come back online. So that is this thing. So, Samir, what about agents for hypervisors like Zen, XCPNG, Citrix, etc.? I am not sure about what you want for the agents for the hypervisors over there. Is something that you can talk about. Drill down into reports that are this thing. So the drill down basically is being worked on. So the team will essentially get the drill downs in 3 weeks from now. That is the committed time that we have from them. So within 3 weeks, you will see that this thing. Actionable items, seeing the items that require attention, should we applying remediation directly? So we already have the solutions page. And in fact, because you guys basically, I think most people are not confusing the solutions page, we will essentially rename it to remediation plan, and then you will basically see the remediation plan. So this is a rename that we will do very shortly, and we'll update the documentation with this. Okay. If you say the new reporting functionality, Matt, what has happened is that we didn't start running onto that group because a lot of people told us that we still were basically missing a lot of reports, which we had to complete from a V3 compatibility perspective. So the team was busy with that. We are redesigning now that we've got compatibility. We are now basically beginning. We have finally got the time to start redesigning the reports. And now I will basically start involving everybody into that group where we'll redesign the reports. So because I wanted to make sure that because everybody felt that we were spending too much of time trying to get new reports when all our existing reports were still not there. So that's the reason for why we didn't complete the focus group, but we will start it very shortly. If you make a manual ticket from a vulnerability, will it still auto close if the vulnerability is resolved? Yes, so that will work. Okay. Once a new VM is set up for our on-prem V4 install, is there a process that can let us migrate one client at a time from V3 to V4? Or is the migration process an all or nothing process? You can migrate it client by client. You can migrate it company by company, Jerry. Hardware. Yeah, so hardware requirements will be basically in the KB that we'll send you as part of the image, so you can see it. Because the point is that the image, it comes as a OVA file, so it already has the inbuilt requirements with it, so that will be there. Okay, so yeah, so that I got covered, but I did notice that somebody had put something in Q&A. Okay. Maybe establish dependency policies for applications linked to whitelisting. If you add an application to whitelist, adds required dependencies to the whitelist too. But in that case, I really would need to know that what are the required dependencies for that application. So we don't maintain that database. So I think, yeah, we can provide a mechanism by which you can add the whitelisted applications, but I don't know. I really don't know whether we can essentially provide this too. So add an option to add regex to PI inspection to use other needs that are not PII. Enrique, this is something that we can release very shortly, because right now we have a fully configurable engine that is basically in there. So we can expose this functionality very soon. I'll add it to the API very quickly. It will come in the UIs shortly. Can you add PI, PHI, credit card, etc. scans for M365? The need for Copilot security. This will determine what areas of M365 are accessible by the user in this thing. So the answer to this, that we are releasing a new module, which is basically the Office 365 security module. And these are basically part of that Office 365 security module. Okay. So that is that. So let me go back to the chat where there are a few more questions, I guess. So Matt, I agree. We basically were looking at one of the tools to basically kind of do the dashboards. But then what happened is that we in fact purchased a commercial tool. However, that tool could not scale, and it basically kind of when we basically brought it on for a larger scale, it kind of failed, which is why we basically had to use a different system that we developed on our own. But we will essentially give customizable dashboards very soon. And that will basically be technology that we have developed in-house that we basically are bringing to the fore, more of a drag and drop builder kind of thing, which is basically much more advanced. And the second thing is that, like, look, the point is that it would be very simple for me to expose the current system to you. But in that case, you need to understand what is the schema of the database, and then you have to write SQL queries. I know there are a lot of you who basically are experts in SQL queries, but the moment we give SQL query access, then that's not something that our security auditors are looking very lightly at, and they get very upset about it, etc. So we basically are looking at a way by which we can provide access to you in a way by which we can essentially kind of define the entire structure and provide all the access through just APIs, and basically still make it performant and keep your dashboards loading. So that's essentially what we're working on. But as I said, that is something that we will basically be doing that in the month of June. We'll be working on it, and we'll release it in July. There is the Office 365 security module actually is undergoing testing right now. So I think next week I can basically do a demo to all of you, and then we will basically release it probably around 2 to 3 weeks later. Yeah. Asset solution remediation plan. Is there a way to quickly output all affected assets without having to click on each? There's a remediation plan report which is there, which has all of this details. You just download that report, and an Excel spreadsheet, you will get all of this data. Yes, we will basically do it. I will try to do it on the next call, Jerry, and but I'm not committing on it because I know you guys pulled me to it. So I'm going to try to do it next week. If not next week, the following week I will do it. Okay. Okay, I think I've covered all the questions, and we've had this update. So with this, folks, I just wanted to say thank you very much for your time today. It was great meeting all of you, and please keep the feedback coming. We understand that sometimes you undergo a lot of frustration when you try to use the product and basically this thing, but when you give us feedback, we work on it, and we are genuinely working on every single piece of feedback that you folks give. And we basically honor the feedback that you give and the time that you're taking to putting to basically give us this feedback. So thank you very much again, and basically have a great week ahead.